I'm Jim Gordon at Beers & Gordon.
Hi, I'm David Beers of Beers & Gordon. Today I want to talk about rear-end accidents. Who is at fault in a rear-end accident? First of all, you would assume that fault is automatic in a rear-end accident, and that assumption is really not right. The fact is that most of the time we will determine that the liability for the accident occurs when it's in a rear-end collision because of the presumption of negligence that the courts have created that the driver striking you from the rear is negligent as a matter of law. However, there are various exceptions to that doctrine, which is why it is extremely important when you speak with an attorney about the accident that you make sure that you describe specifically what you were doing with your motor vehicle before you were rear-ended.
In Florida, in a rear-end accident, the person that is at fault is usually the vehicle that strikes the other vehicle. So the vehicle that rear-ends the other vehicle is presumed to be at fault. It's called the rebuttable presumption. What that means is it can be overcome by certain facts. Really, the only fact that allows the person that struck the other driver to get out of a rear-end accident is if there's what's called a sudden and unexpected stop. So let's say the example would be you're driving through an intersection, you're following someone, and someone for no reason, not a vehicle, not a pedestrian, not a bike or anything like that, they just stop in the middle of the intersection for absolutely no reason, and then you strike that person. The argument would be you did not expect them to stop, there was no reason for them to stop, and that was what's called a sudden and unexpected stop. So that would be the way to defend a rear-end accident.
What about someone striking you when you are absolutely stopped? Does it make any difference whether you're stopped or whether you're moving a little bit? The answer to that is yes, it does. If you're in a stopped position, that is when the rebuttable presumption of negligence that I mentioned earlier kicks in. But if you're not stopped, and specifically if your foot's not on the brake, then there could be questions about why you're stopped, and that may create issues of fact, which the jury might have to determine. It's called comparative negligence.
Clients will come in sometimes where they're in a chain reaction accident. Sometimes there could be several vehicles involved. I'm going to use an example of 3 vehicles involved. This happens a lot on I-4. We see when people are slowing and stopping for traffic. Someone will slow and stop for traffic. The striking vehicle, the rear vehicle, is not paying attention, and you may be stopped, and 3 or 4 vehicles ahead of you are stopped. And as you're stopped, you get hit from behind, and then you get pushed into another vehicle. That person that struck you, that caused that rear-end accident, is going to be found at fault. They're also going to be found at fault for any injuries for you getting pushed into someone else. So you are not going to be found at fault for striking that other vehicle if you're pushed into that other vehicle. So that happens in chain reaction accidents. We actually see in those type of accidents, because the clients suffer what's called 2 impacts, an impact to the rear, impact to the front, a lot of times those are the type of clients that have more injuries because they suffer a double impact.
Again, the issues will be determined, a fault will be determined by whether or not the vehicle was stopped. And so if no other vehicle was stopped except one, that vehicle obviously will not be comparatively negligent. But if, for example, you had slowed but had not completely stopped and then you were rear-ended, the question will be whether you could have stopped prior to the time that you were rear-ended. Florida's Indivisible Injury rule. So that fault, where there's multiple vehicles, is sometimes difficult to sort out. In Florida, it's very important that the injuries you receive be severable, that is, separatable from the various collisions. But for the doctors, it doesn't matter. If they say that your injuries are caused as a result of multiple impacts and they can't divide how they occurred, then you are to receive recovery for the entire injury that you sustained.
They say 7.2% of accidents in the United States, rear-end accidents, unfortunately, end up being fatal, so they can be very serious accidents. We look into those cases all the time. A lot of cases that come in the door at Beers & Gordon are rear-end accidents because they are clear liability. And even though sometimes they'll deny liability at the scene, or they may deny liability even during the claims process, it's exceptionally rare that when we go to trial in those type of cases they don't deny liability, or they deny liability in those cases. So